Audiobook by Fates Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel in comments below. We love to know what you want to hear next.
Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 91, Moon Guardian. This is Fengdu, restricted area for a living person. The birdhead mutant gave off a bird cry and it sounded very weird. His voice was fluent like a human. You're a living person and you shouldn't come here. Village chief had a serious expression as he smiled. I'm already here, the birdhead mutant said. If you want to leave, you'll have to pay the price. Village chief asked curiously, what's the price? There's King of Hell in Fengdu. The birdhead mutant's eyes seemed to be looking at its beak as it spoke. King of Hell has noticed you and admires you very much. Therefore, King of Hell has this request. If you agree to this request, you're free to go. Village chief had a slight change in expression as he asked politely, what's the request? The birdhead mutant replied, after you die, you'll belong here. Village chief muttered to himself irresolutely and suddenly smiled. Living realm of the dead, dead realm of the living. If I died and could still come here, why would I not want to? Living outside means to be dead here, and being dead outside means to be alive here. It's a good thing to be able to live here after I die, I agree. However, can I ask you a few questions? The birdhead mutant leaned its head to one side and replied, you may ask, but I won't necessarily answer. Village chief gave a slight smile. Is Carefree Village that moon ship? No. Village chief was stunned and cried out. If it isn't Carefree Village, why would it attract Moor's jade pendant? Why would the jade pendant point its way here? And also, why did Moon Ship appear here? The birdhead mutant frowned. Its eyeballs once again stared at its beak. It was obvious that it was annoyed at Village Chief for having so many questions. The moon herders on board Moon Ship have all died out. They're extinct. Moon Ship was sent here by the last Moon Guardian. There's a dead man living on the ship. You can go ask him. He might have the answer. Dead man? Could it be the Moon Guardian? Village chief was bewildered. The birdhead mutant raised a leg and ruffled the feathers on its neck, picking out a golden bug to eat it. Then it said impatiently, you have too many questions. Village chief asked, what's with the devil god that attacked me? Isn't Fengdu the territory of Heavenly Devil Horde? She's an occupant here. This place belongs to King of Hell and not Heavenly Devil Horde. The birdhead mutant turned a blind eye to him and used its beak to preen its feathers. You'll stay here like her in the future. King of Hell admires you very much. Village chief spat out a murky breath. He had originally thought it was the world of the devil, but he had still guessed wrong. It seemed like the devil god he had trapped was just a big shot in the living realm of the dead. He asked again, where's Carefree Village? The birdhead mutant had completely lost patience with him this time and flapped away. You have too many questions and I really hate you. Don't forget your promise. When you die, I'll be there to get you. Don't follow the messengers of death. Village chief sent him off and looked at Moon Ship. The enormous Moon Ship had already stood up and pulled the moon forward aimlessly. I've been despised. Could it be that I had more to talk after growing old? Village chief didn't know whether to laugh or cry and walked over to Moon Ship. Meanwhile, the devil god was still struggling to break free from the bleeding whirlpool in the sky. This devil god used Moon Ship to attract Moor, and it should know some secrets regarding Carefree Village. It's a pity I can only trap her and can't force her to say what she knows. He boarded Moon Ship and came onto the ship that the toad was carrying. Looking around, he could see a great number of palaces which were run down, having crumbling fences and dilapidated walls. There were also huge weapons that had collapsed on the ground. Many of them were full moon-shaped weapons, and there were also items like mirrors. The palaces here were huge and not places an ordinary person would stay. He passed by a huge main hall and stopped to inspect the sculptures in front of this huge main hall. What was sculpted here was a three-legged jade toad. It had 3 legs, a human's body and a toad's head, making it a half-human, half-toad. Sure. A peculiar laughter came from the halls, and village chief could hear that sinister voice singing a nursery rhyme. Row, row, row your boat, gently down the stream. Village chief hesitated for a moment and ignored this voice and walked to the main hall in front instead. The main palace was in a mess with the censer on the ground and the incense ashes all scattered on the floor. The bronze sparrow lamps were smashed. The screens were broken and jade beds were shattered. It was evident that a huge change had happened here. He looked around and stopped at the wall painting in the main hall. On the painting were tall giants wearing white robes and herding the moon. They drove moon ship and only appeared at night. There were numerous strong and vicious devils outside attacking the ship, but they were all pushed back by the giants using spears, knives, swords, bows, and arrows. When the dawn breaks and the darkness retreats, moon ship would return to a deep abyss which should be moon well. Village chief inspected closely and could see that the giants had handsome appearances. On the heart of their brows was a crescent. It seems like the bird mutant was right. Moor is indeed not a moon herder. There's no crescent on Moor's forehead. Walking a circle in the main hall, he didn't discover more stuff. He then came to the few pillars which were in the center of the halls. The incomparably thick pillars had chains coiled around them, and the other end of the chains were floating towards the sky, tied to a crescent moon. Moon ship was moving, therefore the broken moon was also being dragged. As the broken moon rumbled forward, huge fireballs would fall from the sky. They were the mountain rocks on the broken moon. This moon was destroyed, therefore rocks would fall from even the slightest movement and become meteors. Some meteors were not fully burnt and would crash into Carefree Village and smash huge holes in the ground, making it very dangerous. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. Hee 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 hee. The singing voice became more and more strange. Village chief frowned and looked around, but he couldn't see anyone. He couldn't help but have a chill running up his spine. At this moment, he saw the source of the voice. On the ground in the middle of the pillars was a face, a huge face. The huge face was currently singing this nursery rhyme, which became slightly creepy. His hair was in a mess and he was like a lunatic sealed in the mirror. However, moon guardians of the moon herd tribe, village chief sighed and sat down. He grabbed a stone and sculpted it in the shape of the jade pendant in front of Qin Mu's chest to ask, "Moon guardian, have you seen this jade pendant before?" "Life is but a dream." The huge face giggled. "A dream?" Village chief frowned. This moon guardian should have died when he had completely fused with the ship. He gave it his all to move moon ship into the living realm of the dead, but he died in the ship's body instead. Even if he was revived in the living realm of the dead, he could only live in the ship's body and was unable to come out. He turned crazy after he died. Village chief stood up and was about to leave when the face of the ground suddenly said, "The jade pendant of Carefree Village?" Village chief stopped in his steps and immediately turned back. "You know where's Carefree Village?" "Of course I know." The face on the ground seemed to regain part of his sanity. "We the Moon Herder are from Carefree Village. Even the token of the Moon Guardian is made by Carefree Village. Even the moon ship is also from Carefree Village." "That's right. Moon Herders. Moon Herders." He laughed out loud until tears streaked his face. "Dead. They're all dead. Their corpses can't even be pieced together. Haha. They're dead. I run. I scare. I left them. Hee hee." Village chief asked, "Where's Carefree Village?" "Gently down the stream." Village chief sighed and left when he saw he couldn't ask anything out from him. He came to the dock and saw his limbs vanished without a trace again. He gave a sigh internally and saw the gold coin on the wooden pillar. He broke into a smile. Moor is still the thoughtful one. He took out the gold coin, which was giving off a faint glow. Village chief waved the gold coin towards the dense fog, and soon a small boat floated over with a lantern on it. Village chief floated up the boat and stood upright at the bow of the boat, which floated into the dense fog. There are numerous unsolved mysteries in this mysterious land, and he would come to explore this land if he had the chance in the future. However, that should happen after his death, right? Ling Jing sure is living free and easy, roaming all over the place to witness all these wonderful stuff. I guess I could only be relieved of this burden after I'm dead, right? He then silently thought to himself, "It's just when I'm dead. I can only remain in this living realm of the dead and can't explore the unknown wonders in this world." The small boat sailed to the entrance of the Sea of Fog, and village chief saw Qin Mu sprinting frantically. Seeing how great educational heavenly devil scriptures had transformed into a silver thread which kept on piercing and slicing the skeletons that were pouncing at him, village chief then let out a sigh of relief. Seeing the small boat floating over, Qin Mu also let out a sigh of relief and was elated. Left with 2 trump cards, which were the great educational heavenly devil scriptures and Emperor's disc, he was barely holding off the attacks. At this moment, the strange world behind them suddenly became hazy and blurry as a loud crow from a rooster sounded out. "Crap! It's dawn!" Village chief's expression changed slightly and immediately rose into the air. Grabbing Qin Mu, he frantically rushed toward outside. As the 2 of them rushed out from this incredible world, Qin Mu's feet sank as he stepped onto the river surface of Surging River, and the waves swept across his feet. They had returned to Surging River. Turning back to have a look, the world seemed to become a painting which had been drawn by the fog. With a gust, it instantly disappeared, and the jade pendant had also lost all signs of activity. With the darkness retreating, the world had completely vanished from great ruins as if it had never existed. It should be the next night when the entrance to this world would appear. However, no one would know where the entrance would have floated to. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 92. Professional Test Breaker. Qin Mu stretched his palm out and gently touched the air. He could not find any trace of the world's existence. Village chief hesitated for a moment, but he still told Qin Mu about his encounter in the living realm of the dead. Qin Mu stared with his eyes wide open. Village chief actually had such an encounter? There's a king of hell in the living realm of the dead, therefore it shouldn't be the world of the heavenly devils and should be something left behind before the darkness. It should be part of great ruins before the darkness had descended. Village chief analyzed. The king of hell in the living realm of the dead should be a clergy as well, just like Sun Guardian and Moon Guardian. However, Carefree Village isn't there, and I couldn't extract where exactly it was from the birdhead mutant. Your jade pendant led you to the living realm of the dead might be because both the moon ship and your jade pendant came from Carefree Village. He sighed. The world of great ruins is simply too huge. Staying here so long, I had never thought that there would be so many layers of worlds. There are at least 3 layers of worlds here. Qin Mu nodded his head. Great ruins in the day, dark realm in the night, as well the living realm of the dead which appears in dark realm. This night they had seen the 3 layers of worlds in great ruins. This incredible encounter wasn't necessary to let others know because not many people would believe it. On their way back, they passed by the little village where they had met the messengers of death. Qin Mu stopped and looked towards the village, which was dilapidated and covered in spider webs. It was evident that no one had stayed here for quite some time. However, it wasn't so last night. Last night, there was an elder carrying a lantern and making paper boats. These were the mystical and strange points of great ruins that no one could understand. Is there a relation between the living realm of the dead and the messengers of death? Qin Mu asked. Village chief shook his head. I've no idea either. However, as I see it, the messengers of death don't belong to the living realm of the dead. The king of hell in the living realm of the dead should be only the king of hell in great ruins. Whereas I have also met messengers of death and such village in the outside world as well. They are the gods of Netherworld. Qin Mu scratched his head. Netherworld? Living realm of the dead? Messengers of death? So complicated that his head would explode if he reflected on them. Carefree Village is even more mysterious than this living realm of the dead. We won't be able to find this mysterious place in just a short while. Village chief continued, Moor, I'm afraid you'll have to wait to find out about your ancestry. Don't worry, as long as Carefree Village is still in great ruins, we'll definitely be able to find it. Qin Mu nodded his head. When I get stronger, I can go find out about my ancestry myself. Village chief, He hesitated for a moment, but Village chief understood what he wanted to say and smiled. You want to leave great ruins and train in the outside world? Qin Mu nodded his head with his heart on tenterhooks. Devil Cult Patriarch sent a letter for you and a letter for Granny C. I have also taken a look at it. He has only 7 years left to live. so it's only logical you head over to Eternal Peace Empire to meet him. Village chief said unhurriedly. The bird will have to leave home one day to broaden its horizons. Before entering the darkness, I had discussed this with Apothecary, Granny and the rest, and they had all agreed. Qin Mu's eyes lit up. Village chief continued. They say as long as you pass their tests, you will be able to leave the village for an experience. Qin Mu disappointed. No matter what, he would still have to pass the tests to leave the village. Village chief smiled. And I'm your 9th test. Moor, once you pass all these 9 tests, you'll be considered an adult and you'll be free to spread your wings. Qin Mu's face turned even blacker. The 8 tests from Old Ma and the rest were already extremely difficult, and Village Chief's test made him feel as if he was looking up at a towering mountain that he could never pass. How could he pass the 9 tests? Suddenly Qin Mu felt warmth flowing out from the heart of his brows and into his whole body. Every part of his body and mind was comfortable, and his vital qi was also circulating vigorously by itself, making him cry out in astonishment. Village Chief's expression changed slightly as he felt the vigorous vital qi in the body of this youth beside him. It gave him the feeling that a small sun was hidden in the heart of the youth's brows. Moor, your spirit embryo has awakened? Village Chief asked. Qin Mu replied, It has. My spirit embryo doesn't seem different from before, just that there's something different with my vital qi. Regarding the overlord body that he had made up, Village Chief also knew nothing about it. Therefore, he couldn't say anything to help even if he wanted to. He could only console him. I have never seen a spirit embryo awakening 4 times. However, if it's a good thing, there's no need to worry. Is the change in your vital qi a good one? Qin Mu nodded his head repeatedly, and Village Chief smiled. Then that's good. Disabled elderly village. The darkness retreated and the morning sun rose. It was already the 3rd month of spring today, but it was still chilly in the morning. Qin Mu woke up early in the morning and scooped up a bucket of water from the village's well to pour it over his half-naked body to wake himself up. His vital qi burst forth in vermilion bird vital qi and evaporated the water on his body. Soon he was energized. Moor, pour a bucket on me as well. Butcher propped himself over with his hands. Qin Mu scooped up another bucket of water and poured it on Butcher's head. Refreshing! Flames surrounded Butcher's body and turned the bucket of water into white steam. He immediately waved his hands and made his pig slaughtering knife flow over into his hand. He took his big knife to quickly shave his beard while the steam was still there. Old Ma pushed open his room door and unloaded 2 doors at his sides. He stretched his lazy back and all the bones in his body cracked. A green dragon coiled around him, and with a raise of his hand, he sealed his 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death divine treasure, and only left the spirit embryo divine treasure open. He then shouted, Damned cripple, are you awake? I am. Cripple hobbled out with combing his hair with a small comb. He dressed himself up nicely and looked like a refined elder as he smiled. Today is the big day, therefore I've to wake up early. Is Def awake? What's the commotion about? Def was grinding his ink and painting in his study. With 2 metal ears in his ear holes, he didn't even raise his head. Mute was currently pouring out the slags in his furnace. Apothecary was feeding some small fire-breathing birds at his windowsill, and a small bird then flew to Village Chief's room to peck on his window. Village Chief's voice came from inside. I know. I'm awake already. Granny C was cooking on the stove and steaming rice in a wooden bucket. Cripple ran over to lift the lid and was smacked by Granny C using the spatula. Giving him a stare, she scolded. What's the hurry? Have you washed your hands and face? Use the toothpaste to brush your teeth. Cripple immediately scooped up some water to wash his hands and face. He then asked Apothecary for some toothpaste and used a wooden toothbrush to brush his teeth. Granny C called Qin Mu over, and the 2 of them hurried to serve the dishes and scooped rice. Old Ma arranged the table and chairs, and soon all the villagers in disabled elderly village seated in front of the table. Qin Mu placed a set of chopsticks and bowl for everyone before carrying Village Chief up and placed him on the recliner before sitting down. Qin Mu rose to pour wine for every villager before pouring a cup for himself. Granny C raised her wine cup and was on the verge of tears. Butcher complained, "Why are you crying on a day of exultation? You clearly want him to go outside in your heart, yet you still can't bear to see him leave. Women sure are sentimental." Granny flew in a rage and stared angrily at him. She then smiled and said, "Today is a day of exultation for Qin Mu, so I won't stoop to your level. Muer, everyone, let us have a toast." Everyone drained the cup with one gulp, and Qin Mu chuckled as he poured the wine for everyone again. At the same time, he carefully said, "Hope that everyone would use lesser strength and go easy on me." Butcher smiled, "Rascal, don't be so cocky. You might already be sprawling on the ground after the first test." The rims of Granny C's eyes turned red again. "Muer, do remember to come back often to visit us after you leave the village." Butcher smiled. "He may beat all of you, but he can't beat me." Granny C flew into a rage again and pressed his face into the bowl while smacking his head with her chopsticks. "You talk too much. My Muer is the overlord body. He will definitely beat you until you cry for your parents." Butcher cried for his parents and begged for forgiveness repeatedly before Granny let him off. After breakfast, Qin Mu cleaned up the cutlery and village chief asked, "Has everyone sealed the rest of the divine treasures?" Everyone nodded silently. "Then let us begin." Old Ma walked out and said indifferently, "Muer, you have learned your fist skill from me, therefore you'll definitely lose if we are to compete in fist skill. You can execute whatever you've learned. As long as you beat me, it will be considered as a pass." Qin Mu bowed and a dragon roar could be heard. His vital chi turned into a green dragon coiling around his body, and he said firmly, "I would like to use fist skill to take Grandpa Ma's test." Old Ma gave a smile. "Ambitious. However, this way you might not be able to pass the first test." Both of them stretched out their hands, and Qin Mu suddenly made the first move. With his vital chi bursting forth, Tempest of the Nine Dragons was executed in his first punch. His grandiose vital chi burst forth with his punch, and dragon markings could be faintly seen in the air. Similarly, Old Ma also used Tempest of the Nine Dragons to face him. "Are you trying to compete the transformations in our dragon forces?" Boom! Old Ma had a huge change in expression. It was as if a behemoth weighing dozens of tons had collided with him, making him fly backward and crash into Mute's smithy. Shattering through the smithy didn't stop him from flying backward. In midair, he involuntarily activated his 5 elements divine treasure, and with a drone, the terrifying power in his 5-element divine treasure burst forth, and he finally stopped. However, at this moment, the shirt on his back exploded into countless pieces and indistinctly turned into 49 green dragons rushing backward as they raised a gale. The several huge poplar trees ruffled loudly from the gale, and their leaves scattered randomly. Old Ma twisted his waist and landed on the ground with a bewildered look. Cripple was currently eating a braised pig trotter and stuffed the pig trotter into his mouth in shock, leaving only the toe outside. Butcher was currently sharpening his knife, and the whetstone broke with a crack. Apothecary and village chief were drinking tea, and their teacups all exploded. Blind's bamboo cane was squeezed into a bamboo strip, and Def's ink had spilled all over the table. Granny C crushed a stack of porcelain bowls while the hen dragons just clucked and flapped its wings back into its chicken coop, stretching its claws to close the wooden door of the chicken coop. Apothecary looked at village chief and whispered, "What happened after you two had gone out at night? How did Qin Mu's cultivation raise so much?" Village chief was also at a loss. He suddenly came to realization and whispered back. His spirit embryo had awakened a 4th time. He said there was nothing different with his spirit embryo. It just that his vital chi was slightly different. The corners of Apothecary's eyes twitched as he muttered, "This is slightly different? How did I know his slightly different was actually several times increment in vital chi?" Village chief also muttered. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 93. Heaven Pilfering Sun Switching. "I've lost." Old Ma spat out a murky breath and gave a gratified smile. "Brute force can overcome everything. Muer, the power in your strength could make up for the lack in your moves. You've passed." "That's right. Why did your cultivation raise so much in such a short time? Even I can't shake off your strength." Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and smiled. On the way back after going out with Village Chief, my spirit embryo. Village Chief immediately gave a few coughs and Qin Mu was bewildered. Village Chief, what's wrong? I was startled by your move just now. Village Chief gave another 2 coughs and asked, You've passed the first test, so what about the second? Cripple pulled out the pig trotter in his mouth and hobbled over while chuckling. Moor. Let's not compete fist skills and compete leg skills instead. Raise your head and look. Do you see that cloud there? Qin Mu raised his head and only saw a white cloud slowly drifting across. Cripple smiled. Let us contest our leg strength and see who can reach that cloud first. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and nodded his head. Cripple smiled warmly. You're still young. I'm fond of children, so I shall let you have a head start. Qin Mu also smiled warmly. I respect the elderly, so you can go first. You're still young. You go first. Your old body isn't that good anymore. You should still go first. Both of them wore the fake smiles on their faces and politely pushed each other to move first. Butcher raised both his knives and shouted, Stop being so long-winded. That cloud has almost floated away. If you still don't run, old man, I will mince both of you. Qin Mu and Cripple literally burst forth like a hurricane at the same time. Qin Mu stepped repeatedly as wind gathered under his feet. Suddenly he rose into the sky as his feet stepped onto a gale. However, Cripple was already 1 step faster than him. Qin Mu pressed his palms down, and the wind beneath Cripple's feet instantly blew towards the ground, making Cripple flailed his limbs as he fell from the sky. Qin Mu immediately rushed forth and passed Cripple. Just as he was about to travel on the wind, he suddenly felt both of his legs tightened as they got tied up together, causing him to instantly crash head first to the ground. Cripple laughed as a vital chi whip appeared on his hand and locked Qin Mu's legs. Qin Mu fell from the sky and this elder who had lost a leg stepped on his body to rise into the sky. However, at this moment, Qin Mu's vital chi burst forth and snapped his whip. Hugging Cripple's leg, he kicked his feet towards Cripple's face. With a bang, both of them crashed into the ground, raising up all the dust and smoke. Cripple's crutch touched the ground and executed perfect heaven-pilfering leg skills to attack Qin Mu. Lying on the ground, Qin Mu only attacked his crutch and gave countless kicks to it. Being kicked a dozen times by Cripple, Qin Mu finally kicked Cripple's crutch into pieces. Standing on 1 leg, Cripple scolded angrily, Rascal, who taught you to be so mean? Pushing both his hands on the ground heavily, Qin Mu spun upside down into the sky. Cripple sneered. Bending his only leg, he jumped into the sky with a leap. Just as he jumped up, Qin Mu, who was on top of him, immediately gave him a smack. His vital chi changed into black tortoise vital chi and water markings immediately appeared in the air, which turned into a water dragon that rushed towards Cripple. Little tricks. Cripple sniggered and wind came out from his hands to strike the water dragon, deviating the water dragon. His vital chi then transformed into a leg which was translucent. With both of his legs sprinting, he looked like he was going to overtake Qin Mu. Qin Mu's leg split open and did a horse stance in the air. Pushing the air with his palms, his head flipped back up and the legs went back down. With his legs back together, he sprinted after Cripple and mercilessly struck towards Cripple's back. As the two of them sprinted in the air, they executed their leg skills and they were all despicable moves. Their figures shifted around indefinitely, dazzling the eyes of people below who were looking at them. Suddenly Cripple's arms moved like shadows that even ghosts couldn't notice as he executed heaven-pilfering hand skill. Before Qin Mu could detect his attack, he immediately felt his pants loosening and the pants got pulled down to his ankles. He was immediately tripped by himself and he suddenly felt a chill on his back as his shirt was also taken off by Cripple to tie his hands. As Qin Mu fell from the sky, he urgently ripped his shirt and pulled up his pants. As he sprinted frantically and tied his pants, he shouted angrily, "Grandpa Cripple, you didn't teach me this move." Cripple laughed out loudly. "If you can catch up to me, I'll teach you." Qin Mu snickered and with a punch, the dragon-shaped fist force instantly rushed forth at Cripple. With an astonished cry, Cripple hurriedly changed his footsteps and dodged to one side. Qin Mu molded his qi into thread, and the vital qi thread, which was as thick as an arm, swept towards Cripple like a huge snake. If he was to be tangled up with the vital qi thread, it would be hard for him to break free. Therefore, when Cripple dodged again, Qin Mu had already caught up to him. He then said grudgingly, "All right, I'll teach you." The two of them was full of smiles as they got closer to each other in the air. Cripple was about to attack him when Qin Mu suddenly sealed his 3 souls and 7 spirits before kicking this old geezer down from the sky. Crash! Cripple crashed into the ground and created a human-shaped pit. He then slowly crawled out from the pit, crying tears of joy. As expected of the one I taught, he did not easily believe others. Qin Mu quickly caught up to the cloud in the sky before running diagonally down again. Running a few steps forward as he landed on the ground, he finally stopped. Cripple smiled. "I promised you just now, and I'll not go back on my word. When you pass the 9th test, I'll teach you heaven-pilfering sun-switching hand." Qin Mu was overjoyed. Butcher waved his knife around and smiled. "Muer, do you need to rest?" Qin Mu immediately nodded and sat down to rest. He drank some tea to rehydrate himself, and after resting for quite some time, he ran back in to change a set of clothes. Butcher's face immediately turned black as he muttered, "Rascal, you have such a dense cultivation, so why do you still need to rest? Why can't you just fight? If you just fight, I might still have a chance of winning." Some more time later, Qin Mu went to the collapsed smithy and picked up another pig slaughtering knife. With his 2 pig slaughter crossing each other, he shouted, "Grandpa Butcher, I'm done resting." Butcher sneered. "Originally you only use 1 knife. Why are you using 2 now?" Qin Mu gripped a knife normally and helped the other in a reverse grip. Butcher's expression turned solemn and also reversely gripped his knife on the left hand. Butcher then smiled coldly. "Rascal, you want to fight close combat with me? You are still too inexperienced." Apothecary coughed and reminded, "Butcher, without the lower half of your body, if he gets close to you, you're at a very big disadvantage. You don't have as much muscles as him." Butcher's face turned black again and said resentfully, "He won't be able to close in on me, he will be blocked outside by my knife skills." Old Ma reminded, "His vital qi is abnormally dense and is 2 to 3 times more than yours. If your knife touched his knife, your knife would fly away from the impact. You will also be blown away by him. You can only win him in technique. Then what's the point of fighting?" Butcher flew into a rage and stabbed both his knives into the ground. Rolling his eyeballs, he smiled. "Sit down, Muer. We shan't use knives and only listen to each other power. Put our hands together." Qin Mu stuck the pig slaughtering knives into the ground and sat down in front of him. Using their hands as knives, they too pressed their palms against each other and closed their eyes. They deduced the movement of the opponent's muscle and vital qi circulation through sensing the change in strength in the opponent's palm. Once one of them grasped the distribution of the opponent's strength, one would aim for the weakness and finish his adversary off with a single knife. This was the key to raising the knife from forbidden. Raising the knife from forbidden, the vehicles and horses like thunder. Entering the palace alone, out with the emperor's head in his hand. The meaning of this poem was as I raised the knife and walked out from the emperor's forbidden palace. The horses and vehicles sounded like the rumbles of thunder outside as numerous men and horses blocked my way. It was because I had slaughtered my way into the palace alone and carried the head of the emperor in my hands. The loftiness in this move was something other moves could never attain. The wildness, the disdain, and disregard for everything. However, this move was the move which was most particular on its technique among Butcher's knife skills. It required extreme control of one's own strength and extreme grasp of the opponent's strength as well. This was the pinnacle creation among the battle technique divine arts. As the 2 palms touched, Qin Mu could instantly sense the muscle movement, vital qi circulation and power distribution of his and the opponent's. He instantly perceived that Butcher's vital qi was inferior to his, and in that split second when he used his hand as knives to attack, Butcher had already sensed the change in his strength and had blocked in advance while using his other hand to cleave towards Qin Mu's weakness. Butcher still had a better technique after all. No matter if it was reaction or experience, he far surpassed Qin Mu. However, as Butcher blocked Qin Mu's knife, He then noticed something wrong and flew backward. He was blown out from the village and crashed into the forest by the strength of Qin Mu's hand knife. Looking down, Qin Mu saw that the shirt that he had just changed into was split open by Butcher's knife. He thought what a close call it was. His cultivation was too strong, therefore despite his knife skill was not as good as Butcher's. He could overwhelm him with his cultivation. "I've lost." Butcher leaped from the forest and landed in the village. With both his hands propping on the ground, he fired off without hesitation. "I've lost. Apothecary and Deaf, there's no need for you two to compete. Your cultivation is definitely inferior to his." Deaf sneered. "Who says I'm going to compete with our magic power and cultivation to see who is better at fighting? Moor, I've drawn 2 dragons." Swoosh! With a shake of his hands, he unrolled the paintings and hanged them on the poles. 2 vivid and lifelike ink dragons stood out on the paper and seemed like they were ready to soar off into the sky anytime. However, what's weird was that both dragons had no eyes. "I've taught you the path of painting and calligraphy over these years, and the path of painting and calligraphy isn't like those stupid methods of brawling. It's the thing for the intelligent people and requires comprehension." Deaf placed the brush and said solemnly, "I've drawn these 2 dragons using divine art, and as long as their eyes are painted, they would be able to transform into dragons and fly away. However, with the cultivation of spirit embryo realm, it's impossible to dot the eyes and bring the dragon to life. However, if the cultivation isn't enough, it will have to depend on your painting technique. I have taught you how to bestow divine soul with a dot by using mutual sensitivity. Today, I'll be competing your mutual sensitivity with mine and see which one of us could dot these 2 dragons to life and let the dragon soar into the sky." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 94. Painting Dragons and Dotting Eyes. The moment he said that, everyone in the village exclaimed in admiration. Village chief nodded his head and smiled. "Deaf sure is remarkable. What an elegant way to compete. Bestowing divine soul with a dot by mutual sensitivity, to seize the nature of the world and nothing more than that." Qin Mu went forward and paid his respect to Deaf as a disciple. Deaf's expression changed slightly and immediately avoided. "You and I are having a competition, therefore, there's no master or disciple. You and I are both students now, therefore we shall greet each other as equal. Only after the competition can I be your teacher." Qin Mu knew he always handled stuff peculiarly, therefore, he immediately paid his respect to Deaf as equal, and Deaf also paid his respect back. Each of them picked up a brush and stood in front of the painting, looking at it. Using magic power as divine art and dotting the dragon on the painting to life was already a remarkable achievement. However, with the lack of cultivation in magic power, it would involve the nature of the world if one could still bestow a mind to the dragon in the painting by dotting the eyes with artistic conception. Qin Mu had learned painting, calligraphy, reading, and writing from Deaf. Even though it could be said that Deaf had taught him a lot and Qin Mu had quite a strong foundation in painting techniques after painting quite a number of paintings, it was still the first time for him to try to bestow life to a painting. 1 dot of mutual sensitivity to bestow soul to the human or object in the painting was something Deaf had taught him before, but Qin Mu had never succeeded. This match was much more difficult than the previous few matches. Qin Mu focused his attention on the dragon in the painting which was in front of him. This dragon was too lifelike, therefore, as his gaze landed on it, he actually felt like that the dragon in the painting was slowly moving and changing its pose continuously. Deaf's painting technique sure was extraordinary. Even the eyes hadn't been drawn. He already had the feeling that the dragon in the painting was about to soar into the sky. Qin Mu held the brush, yet he didn't start painting. The dragon in the painting was right in front of him, so how should he dot the eyes? He felt that no matter how he dotted it, it would be hard for him to bring this dragon to life. No matter where he dotted, it would be wrong. Moor, rip Deaf's painting and you'll win. Granny C couldn't help but mumble to Qin Mu under her breath. Deaf rolled his eyes at her. Evil and unorthodox method. I teach Moor how to read the holy books. Therefore, he is wise and a holy man at heart. He won't make such an evil move like you. Granny C flew into a rage. Village chief smiled. Granny, don't interfere with their showdown. Deaf's test for this match is very ingenious. Granny C could only restrain her anger. In Qin Mu's eyes, only the dragon in the painting remained. The village no longer existed in his eyes, and only the painting was floating in front of him. A few moments later, the painting also disappeared, and all that was left was the dragon painted with ink. In his eyes, this dragon sometimes swam up and sometimes swam down, while other times it would also swim left and right. It was sometimes soaring in the air, sometimes coiling up and sometimes prone on the floor. It would raise its head, sway its tail, slither like a dragon, play with water, spit fire and lightning, which made it all kinds of strange for being so clever. Qin Mu felt like he had become the dragon in the painting. However, from this angle, everything in his eyes was black because he was still missing his eyes. He tried his best to break out of this darkness, but he didn't know how to open his eyes. He remembered the dragon pillars in Border Dragon City and the dragon bones, as well as the dragon soul in Surging River Dragon Palace. He remembered the statues in the village and the touch of the divine being. The god statue that the divine being had sculpted was also a form of art. Those incredible skills and the profound grace carved within had seemed to bestow souls into the sculptures and let them protect great ruins like gods. After some time, Qin Mu felt that a line of light gradually appeared in the darkness. It was as if the dragon had slowly opened its eyes. When all the darkness in front of his eyes had dispersed, a trace of vigor burst forth from Qin Mu's eyes. He raised his brush and dotted the dragon's eyes, bestowing the divine soul with a dot using mutual sensitivity. With his brush down, the dragon in the painting instantly came alive on the paper. Shaking its head and swaying its tail, it suddenly flew into the sky from the paper and frolicked among the clouds. Only white paper was left on the painting, and there was not even half a drop of ink. Qin Mu stared blankly. He actually succeeded. He actually succeeded in dotting a dragon painting to life. That dragon flew around in the sky for a moment and soon turned back into ink, dyeing the clouds black. Qin Mu urgently looked towards Def, only to see that he had already washed his brush and hung it back on the rack. He didn't dot the eyes for the dragon in the painting in front of him. Qin Mu instantly realized, "Grandpa Def, you let me win?" Def shook his head. "I didn't let you win. When I was your age, I didn't have such high attainment like you did. My test is not about winning or losing. A teacher is to impart his knowledge to his disciple and solve his doubts. I'm currently imparting my path to you, so why should I care about winning or losing?" Apothecary exclaimed in admiration. "Def, you have the heart of a teacher, which I really admire. Moore, my test isn't about competing with you as well, and instead, I want you to refine medicine. Go to the herb garden outside the village and gather 30 highly poisonous plants to refine them into a medicine of great supplement. After the medicine is done, you'll have to consume it. If it supplements you, you'll pass the test. If you are poisoned and die, you'll have to continue to stay in the village." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could he remain in the village if he died from poisoning? Apothecary's objective was very obvious. To use 30 highly poisonous plants to create a medicine of great supplement would require one to be extremely proficient in medical knowledge. The amount of each herb, to use the leaf or the root, to use the pollen or the petal, to boil it or to cure it, all these needed careful studies. Furthermore, Apothecary didn't tell him the prescription and let him decide how much herbs he should use and how he should concoct the medicine so that the toxic would counter each other in a full cycle to become a great supplement with his own medicinal knowledge. In the concocting process, the heat was also very crucial. Qin Mu had to use his own judgment from his experience in concocting medicine to decide when a herb should be placed in, whether should it be in powder form or in pieces, the heat control, and the time taken to boil a herb. The slightest mistake would make a world of difference. If there was any mistake in any part, all of Qin Mu's hard work would be for naught, and he would concoct out a highly toxic substance to poison himself. Qin Mu stood at the side of Apothecary's herb garden and took a look at the herbs inside. Muttering to himself for a while, he calculated the toxicity of all the herbs in the garden and wondered how to match them together, how to assign a ruler and his ministers, how to vanquish dragons and tiger, how to balance out the yin and yang. After some time, he then came into the herb garden to carefully gather the herbs. When he gathered the 29th herb, Qin Mu stopped gathering and carefully caught a 5-patches fly from the leaf of a poisonous herb. Pinching off its head and removing the wings, He took it as the 30th toxic medicine. Qin Mu returned to the village and used vital qi to cure the rhizome of some herbs to refine out the excess medicinal energy. Some of the herbs were steamed with water and some were roasted to extract the water out. After being busy for a long time, he now then started to concoct the medicine. Apothecary stood not far away and observed his every step and every method as well as how he used his vital qi while nodding his head silently. As Qin Mu concocted his medicine, he used his vital qi to prop the huge cauldron in the air. Throwing the 30 herbs into the cauldron, he didn't add any water and instead used his incomparably dense vital qi to nourish the herbs, using his vital qi which had no attributes to extract the medicinal energy from the medicines. Apothecary had a slight change in expression. This was Qin Mu's unique technique and even he won't be able to learn it. His vital qi had an attribute and the herbs also have their own attributes. Vital qi would spoil the medicinal property of the medicines. Only Qin Mu, who had no attributes in his own vital qi, could use this method, this technique, to extract the medicinal energy. Qin Mu became even more careful as he split his vital qi into 30 strands and each of them permeated one type of medicine. At the same time, vermilion bird vital qi burst forth from the hand which was propping up the huge cauldron and turned into blazing flames, causing the medicinal energy in the cauldron to start to fuse together. Black tortoise vital qi surged out from his other hand as he used water vapor to moist the medicinal energy, slowing down the fusing process and also washing out the dregs in the cauldron. After some time, Qin Mu suddenly stirred this huge cauldron and clattering sounds came from the cauldron. When the huge cauldron had stopped spinning, there were white medicinal pellets that were spinning continuously inside the cauldron. The pellets were crystal clear and were like beads made from sheep-fat white jade. Qin Mu stretched his hand out and picked out a spirit pellet. Granny C asked anxiously, "Apothecary, is there any poison?" Apothecary smiled. "When Mu'er consumes it, you'll know if there's poison." Qin Mu opened his mouth and consumed the spirit pellet. "Don't worry, Granny. There's no toxicity in this spirit pellet." Bang! His hair suddenly exploded out and grew in all directions, scaring Granny C and the rest. Qin Mu immediately said, "Don't be alarmed. It's just that I didn't balance one of the herbs properly and it affected my kidney water. With my kidney waters being stimulated, it just made my hair grow a little thicker." Granny C retorted angrily, "This is a little thicker?" Qin Mu's hair was still growing longer and longer frantically. His hair was like bamboo shoots growing vertically upwards. In just a short while, the hair had already grown 10 yards long. Every strand of hair stood upright and very hard. Qin Mu felt his head getting heavier and replied, "Granny, the biggest advantage of this spirit pellet lies in healing injuries. This spirit pellet could let decomposed muscle rapidly regenerate and heal ripped muscles. Broken bones could also grow and broken tendons can reconnect together. Stimulating the kidney waters is merely an insignificant side effect." His hair was still growing and pressed down heavier and heavier on his head. He almost couldn't support the long hair that was like an explosion on the head. Apothecary held back his laughter and said, "You've passed this test. Butcher, help him tidy up his hair. If it continues to grow longer, his neck is going to snap from the pressure." Butcher went forward and shaved off his hair in 2 to 3 moves. Everyone looked at Mute as he used a towel to wipe his hand and dragged his furnace out from the collapsed smithy. Taking out 2 winter irons, he threw them into the furnace and the fire inside instantly extinguished as frost formed on the walls inside the furnace. Mute walked away and smiled. Ah. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 95, Sword. Qin Mu's hair finally stopped growing and reached his waist. He took out a band to tie up his hair and went come up to the furnace with a grave expression. Granny C frowned. "Mute, you could already smelt winter iron essence at Spirit Embryo Realm?" Mute nodded his head. Granny C spat angrily. "You freak!" Apothecary, Blind and the rest all nodded their heads in deep agreement and said in unison, "Freak! Mute, you're really a freak." Mute was immensely proud of himself and was grinning from ear to ear. Winter iron essence was way better than winter crystal iron, as it was the essence which was extracted out from winter crystal iron. Winter crystal iron could be smelted by the furnace fire and be forged into a weapon, but the cold air from winter iron essence could instantly extinguish the furnace fire and was extremely hard to smelt. Throwing 2 winter iron essences to Qin Mu, Mute clearly wanted him to smelt these 2 winter iron essences and weld the 2 pieces into one before forging it into a weapon. If Qin Mu could complete this, he would pass his test. Qin Mu's vital qi circulated and turned into vermilion bird vital qi. With flames igniting on his palm, he put his hand into the furnace and his other hand started to work on the bellows as he attempted to raise the flames in the furnace to ignite the carbon. However, when his palm entered the furnace, he immediately felt the oppressing cold air and the flames on his hand almost extinguished. Even the vermilion bird vital qi looked like it was going to freeze. Mute was pleased with himself and signaled to Def, who asked, "You mean that igniting the furnace is one of the tests and requires skill? This involves the marvel of smithing and can't be ignited by brute force." Mute was full of smiles when he suddenly heard a poof as the flames within the furnace burst forth. The carbons were forcibly ignited by Qin Mu's incomparably violent vermilion bird vital qi and overwhelmed the cold air from the winter iron essences. Def looked at Mute in sympathy. Not being able to light the fire with brute force just clearly means that your cultivation at spirit embryo realm is still lacking. What Moore has is enough brute force. Therefore, he is able to light the fire without any skills. Mute signaled angrily and Def smiled. "You sly fox. The furnace fire from the carbon isn't strong enough to smelt the winter iron essences. So it turns out you still have another trick up your sleeve." Qin Mu lighted up the furnace fire and immediately roused his vital qi to push the furnace fire to its maximum. However, the winter iron essences just wouldn't smelt or even turn red from the heat. Qin Mu frowned. Suddenly his 2 hands went into the furnace and grabbed the 2 winter iron essences and used Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. His spirit embryo also started to become berserk, and the vital qi outside the spirit embryo was like a huge fire furnace, as it pushed the vermilion bird vital qi to its limits. The winter iron essences in his hands gradually turned red hot, and not long after, molten iron actually started dripping down. Qin Mu let the molten iron drip into the sluice, and the 2 pieces of winter iron essences melted faster and faster. Not long later, the winter iron essences had all melted and the molten iron had dissolved together. Def looked at Mute, who was dumbfounded. "What are you trying to test him again?" Mute was disappointed. His original intention was to test Qin Mu's smithing ability. To smelt winter iron essence, one must first ignite the stove. However, the heat from the stove isn't able to smelt winter iron essence. But as long as one's cultivation is dense enough, he can still use vermilion bird vital qi to soften the winter iron essence. In his envisage, Qin Mu would soften these 2 winter iron essence and hit them repeatedly with the hammer to weld them together before forging it into a weapon. However, he didn't expect Qin Mu's vital qi to be vigorous beyond belief, and he directly melted the 2 winter iron essences with his vital qi. His aim was to test his skills, but Qin Mu managed to do it as well by using his brute force to overwhelm the skills needed. Furthermore, it was even simpler, making Mute having nothing to say. The clanging sound of the metal striking sounded out as Qin Mu swung his big iron hammer, shooting off sparks in all directions. Every strike contained vigorous vital qi, while he used vermilion bird vital qi to soften and black tortoise vital qi to cool it down as he tempered it by hitting. He hammered it countless times, and gradually a pig slaughtering knife was formed. Mute inspected it and nodded his head weakly. Qin Mu had passed this test. Forging it into a knife, Qin Mu tested its sharpness and was very satisfied. He finally had a weapon forged by himself. Blind smiled. "Moore, don't test out your knife first. You've yet to pass my test. This time we'll compete in reciting poems." Qin Mu's face turned white as he mumbled, "Grandpa Blind, I'll definitely not win you." Def plucked out both of his ears with a pop, which meant that he was not going to listen. Granny C and the rest also had faces of disdain as they said, "Blind, change it to something else." Blind scratched his head, but he couldn't reject everyone. "Then let us compete in spear skills. To gather chi as spear." Throwing away his bamboo cane, his 5 fingers opened up and his black tortoise vital chi instantly transformed into flowing water as a water dragon spear appeared on his hand. Qin Mu's vital qi burst forth and a fire dragon spear appeared. Both of them moved, and the huge spears in their hands continuously vibrated just like poisonous dragons waiting for their chances to pounce out from the abyss. The two of them circled each other continuously, but the water dragon spear and the fire dragon had never touched each other. Qin Mu awakened his heaven's eyes, and his gaze landed on Blind to look for a mistake, but he could never find it. Blind may be blind, but he didn't show any mistake. No mistake, then I shall create one. Circling each other for quite some time, Qin Mu suddenly gave a stomp, and the ground sank as a huge hole was stomped out by him. The vibrations on the ground made Blind's footing unstable. Whoosh! The fire dragon spear in his hands stabbed out, but Blind gave a smile instead. His water dragon spear was unleashed later, but arrived first as he stabbed towards Qin Mu. Even though Qin Mu had stabbed first, Blind's spear was quicker than Qin Mu as it stabbed toward his chest. Qin Mu gave a smile as water splashed around on his chest when a whirlpool appeared and blocked Blind's spear. The water dragon spear on Blind's hands immediately burst apart, and he flew backward from the blast. The long spear in Qin Mu's hands burst forth dramatically and turned into a fire dragon as it stabbed on Blind's chest. Landing on the ground with a flip, Blind staggered and immediately awakened the divine treasures he had sealed to regain his footing. He shouted angrily, "You're cheating, using two types of vital qi at the same time. You have already lost in terms of skill. You only rely on your overlord body vital qi to bully me." Qin Mu mumbled, "Grandpa Blind, do you want to redo it?" Blind's anger turned into joy as he said, "Isn't overlord body meant for bullying others? This is your strength, therefore you have passed my test. Granny, it's your turn." Granny C looked at Qin Mu, who had just won, with a complicated gaze. "Muer, to me, you had already passed my test. When you had fought through the 360 rooms, you had already passed." Qin Mu was slightly stunned. "Granny, which child wouldn't leave their home one day?" Granny C spoke in a low voice. "When they grow up, they'll all have to leave. I can't keep you by my side forever. These old geezers have already let you pass their tests, and it would be selfish of me to not to." She carried her basket and went back to her room, closing the door. Qin Mu was stumped for words. Village Chief gave a cough to make him regain his senses and said, "Muer, if you pass my test, you'll be able to leave disabled elderly village, to leave great ruins and go to the outside world for an experience." Qin Mu turned around and replied, "Village Chief, please advise me." Village Chief smiled. "What us old geezers taught you are all abilities for you to survive in this world. Old Ma taught you strength and dignity. Butcher taught you courage and fearless. Deaf taught you art and elegance. Cripple taught you to run for your life and craftiness. Blind taught you to see through facades and see the truth. Apothecary taught you how to concoct medicine and save lives. Granny taught you wisdom and kindness. Mute taught you flexibility and calmness. And what I can teach you is a ruler, to use your conscience as a ruler to measure good and evil. Raise your sword." Qin Mu took out Junior Protector Sword and raised it in front of him. The back of the sword had separated the blade of the sword into two sides. One side reflected Qin Mu's face, and the other side also reflected Qin Mu's face. There are four sides of a sword. The side that is facing you is your heart, and one side is good and the other side is evil. Village Chief continued serenely, "The side that faces your enemy is your enemy's conscience. One side is good and the other side is evil. The sword is your ruler, which is used to measure good and evil. It is used to measure yours as well as your enemy's. Sword skill is used to measure your enemy's good and evil as well as yours. I shall impart the first form of my sword skill. Once you learn it, it will be considered as a pass and you'll be able to leave the village." Qin Mu became excited. Village Chief was finally imparting sword moves to him. The hearts of Old Ma, Blind, and the rest jolted slightly as they looked at Village Chief. Granny C also pushed open the room door and looked over. Village Chief finally was going to impart sword skills to Qin Mu. This may be a small matter in the eyes of other people, but in their eyes, it was an incredibly big event. Especially to Apothecary, as he knew the meaning hidden in the sword skill Village Chief was going to impart to Qin Mu. Village Chief's sword skill wasn't merely an inheritance, and was more of a responsibility. Learning village chief's sword skills meant that he had to take on the responsibility that even village chief couldn't complete. Apothecary whispered, "Village chief, do you think he could take on that burden?" Village chief smiled. "I can't doesn't mean that he can't either. Devil cult patriarch is old and has 7 years left to live. I'm also old and would only die a few years later than him. It's time to leave behind my legacy." Stirring up his spirit, he told Qin Mu, "My sword skill is called sword pictures, and the first form of sword pictures is called sword treading mountains and rivers." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 96. Sword treading mountains and rivers. Village chief's vital chi flew out and gradually turned into arms and legs. He gently got off from the stretch, and with a wave of his hand, Junior Protector's sword instantly flew out from Qin Mu's hand and landed in his hand. This elder gaze became blurry as if he had sunk into an old memory. HNNG. A sword drone sounded out as Junior Protector's sword floated in the sky. The sword seemed to move very slowly, and the moves it made were clearly defined. Sword flick, sword smear, sword hack, sword wave, sword parry, sword poke, sword jab, sword curve, sword cleave, sword intercept, sword sweep, sword shave, and sword raise. All he used were the most basic sword moves, but what was different was that village chief had put these basic sword moves together and displayed a bizarre way to use the sword. Sword treading mountains and rivers. Under his sword skill, the sword light revealed an up and down silhouette which was majestic like mountains and rapid like rivers. The sword light and the shadow actually formed vast mountains and billowing rivers, forming the picture of mountains and river. The first form of village chief's sword skill was already incomparably complicated. It had the imposing atmosphere which unfolded on a magnificent scale like mountains, clouds, and rivers. These were the mountains and rivers reflected by the light and shadow from the sword. As the secrets of the sword changed irregularly, the mountains and rivers were changing as well. This old man manipulated the sword and sang with a hint of zeal and sorrow. With the imperial strategic advisors intense and the armed fierce generals at the borders, it's a good time to go to war. Can the gods be cut down? Say can. On this day, with the incense tripod on the high build, he shall tread the mountains and river with his sword. Everyone in the city sang harmoniously, receiving the gods coming for congratulations. His sword moved slowly in consideration for Qin Mu to see the path of his sword skills. Even though it was slow, the majesty of his sword skill was still unleashed in great detail while the pointers were given. Qin Mu concentrated on memorizing. Village chief's sword skill may be complicated, but even the most complicated sword skill was formed from the most basic sword moves. As long as he had mastered the most basic moves, he would be able to learn it no matter how complicated the sword move was. When village chief had demonstrated this move once, Qin Mu had already memorized down the sword skill. He used numbers to memorize. For example, sword stab was 1, sword smear was 2, sword hack was 3, so on and so forth. He only needed to remember the order of the numbers, then he could memorize the most complicated sword skill in the shortest time. This was also due to village chief's thoughtfulness. For the past 2 to 3 years, he had never imparted sword skills to Qin Mu, and only made him practice the most basic sword moves daily. This was to let him unleash the power of the most basic sword moves to its maximum potential. With an incomparably solid foundation, it became much simpler and easier for him to learn the complicated sword skill. Qin Mu closed his eyes and reviewed the order of numbers for sword treading mountains and rivers. He then changed the numbers into sword moves and reenacted them in his mind over and over again. After some time, he then used Qi to manipulate sword and control Junior Protector sword to slowly execute the sword skill village chief had taught him. His execution was extremely bitter, weird, awkward, and clumsy. He had to stop time to recall carefully. However, when he executed it the second time, it was much smoother for Qin Mu. However, he still needed to stop once in a while to think. When he executed it for the third time, he could execute the whole set of sword moves smoothly and easily. However, he was still unable to execute village chief's sword skill, which was like rivers and mountains and close to a divine art. Qin Mu practiced over and over again, having stronger and stronger control over sword treading mountains and rivers. Not long after, Granny C had prepared lunch and called him over to eat. Even when eating, Qin Mu would use his vital qi time and time again to hold his chopsticks and practice on the dining table. When night came, he would practice a few more times before going to sleep, and he was also training his sword in his dream. This continued on for over 10 days, and he finally comprehended the crucial point in sword treading river and mountains. The meaning of a book presents itself after reading it 100 times, and it's the same for sword skills. Qin Mu had practiced sword treading mountains and rivers far more than 1,000 times. He knew this move in his heart thoroughly, and when he executed it this time, a divine light suddenly flashed through, and he felt his vital qi fusing perfectly with his sword. With tall mountain range like dragons and the flowing river hanging down, his sword skill was rapidly executed, painting out a scroll of mountains and rivers using the light and shadow of his sword. The sword light was retrieved back into the mouth of the fish dragon with a rush. Then the sword picture of mountains and rivers in front of him gradually disappeared. Qin Mu was stunned. In the end, he had still mastered this sword skill. "Mu'er, you've grown up." Village chief gave a smile and said, "From today onwards, you're an adult and not a child anymore. You can walk out of disabled elderly village and great ruins to make your way in the world." Granny C was leaning on the door, and when she saw the sword picture appearing and disappearing, she had an indescribable feeling in her heart. "Mu'er, you've grown up," she smiled. Qin Mu stayed in the village for a few more days and learned Heaven Pilfering Sun switching hand from Cripple. When he had finally learned Heaven Pilfering Sun switching skill, it was finally time for him to leave the village. Granny C had prepared his luggage for his trip, which was a very huge backpack. A lot of stuff which Qin Mu deemed unnecessary was stuffed in the backpack, and Granny C also transformed great educational heavenly devil scriptures into a white glove for him to wear. Drinking down the farewell wine, Qin Mu finally made his way out of the village. Looking back, he could see all the 9 villagers of disabled elderly village standing at the village's entrance. Even village chief had materialized both of his legs and stood there. Qin Mu ran back and hugged old Ma before hugging Cripple. He hugged everyone once. Then he moved back 2 steps and kowtowed 3 times to Granny C. After having done this, he turned and left. "Mu'er, if you can't win, then you must run," Cripple shouted. "There's poem in the distance but more foulness." Old Ma waved. "You must be strong. If you are bullied, you must fight back and not give in." Butcher raised his pig slaughtering knife. "Don't disgrace us disabled elderly. Chop whoever bully you. Be a gentleman. If you can't win, you can poison him." "Ah, ah." Qin Mu turned his head back and waved while giving off a radiant smile. Not long later, he had come to the Valley of Doom Suppression Palace. Devil Ape was currently cultivating as he did breathing exercises with a monk staff upright beside him. Devil Ape had become all the more sturdy and full of power, his cultivation becoming even more profound. Cultivating Old Ma's fist skills and the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, which Qin Mu had taught him, he wielded the monk staff nimbly and looked more and more like a demon monk which grew black hair all over his body. Old Ma's fist skills and Kakara monk staff were all originated from Buddhism, and even though Overlord Body 3 elixir technique wasn't from Buddhism, it was very suitable for Devil Ape to cultivate. Therefore Devil Ape had unknowingly carried an air of Buddhism around him, which was like the guardian deity of the Buddhist law. What a demon monk! If I could make a monk robe for Big Fella and give him a string of prayer beads which were as big as human heads, it would look even more like the guardian deity of Buddhist law. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration and woke Devil Ape up. "Big Fella, I'm leaving to go far away. I'll have to leave home and it might be quite some time before I can return." Devil Ape scratched its head. "Far?" Qin Mu nodded. "Far." Devil Ape scratched its head again and looked at the beast herd in the valley. He suddenly gave a loud roar, and the dragon elephant who was guarding the beast herd deep in the valley immediately scrambled and sprinted over, wagging its tail in an attempt to curry favor. Without explanation, Devil Ape started to press this behemoth down on the ground and pummeled it. The badly battered dragon elephant gave off miserable shrieks, yet it didn't dare to retaliate. "Guard!" Devil Ape pointed to the beast herd in the valley and gripped its fist tightly. Flexing his arm, his muscles popped out like mushrooms, each as big as an umbrella. Eat, die. Feeling extremely wronged, the dragon elephant sprawled on the ground and nodded repeatedly. Devil Ape pulled out his Kakra monk staff and hammered its chest. I go. Qin Mu shook his head. Far. Devil Ape pointed at itself. I big. You small. Qin Mu shook his head again. I strong. You weak. Devil Ape flew into a rage and stammered. Talk, to you, are really tiring. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head again. I'm entering the humans' territory this time. It's not as big as Great Ruins and there are vicious people everywhere. It would be too conspicuous to bring you around. When you can transform yourself into a human by cultivation, you and I shall explore the world together. Furthermore, with Dragon Elephant being so savage, if you leave him here, he will still stay well behaved for the first few days, but he will definitely eat all your little friends in the valley later. In addition to Dragon Elephant being so dumb, it would be great trouble if he releases the old devil in Doom Suppression Palace. Devil Ape was helpless and could only nod its head. Dragon Elephant had an expression of grievance. Wedging its tail and wiping its tears sadly, it felt that it seemed to have been pummeled for nothing. Qin Mu waved his hand and walked out of Doom Suppression Palace. Young Un. Devil Ape jumped onto the mountain cliff and waved its hand with great strength. Return early. Qin Mu came to the waterfall at Jade Cloud Valley and saw Hu Linger holding on to a few books and explaining the scriptures to the other foxes. She was currently talking about the advantages and the few foxes were obsessed in listening. Qin Mu walked over and Hu Linger quickly placed the ancient books to one side. The other seductive foxes also immediately stood up and paid their greetings in unison. Greetings, young Master Mu. Their voices were loud and crisp. Qin Mu returned their greetings and said, There's no need to be too polite. Linger, I'm here to bid farewell. I'm going to travel far and head to eternal peace that's outside Great Ruins. I'm afraid I won't be back in 3 to 5 months. The white fox's eyes sparkled and immediately ran into the grass hut. Packing her things up, this little fox carried a little backpack and quickly came out while smiling. Sisters, all of you can stay here to cultivate. Young Master Mu and I are going out to explore the world. Let us be off. The little fox's backpack was 100 times smaller than Qin Mu's backpack and looked very dainty when she carried it. Big sister, are you drunk again? A fox asked vigilantly. The people outside are very evil. They would skin us to make clothes. Hu Linger smiled. There's no problem with young Master Mu around. Qin Mu's head started to ache. Linger, this isn't playing house. It's very dangerous. Stay here and accompany your sisters. Hu Linger smiled. The great demon king had forced me to marry him, but I dislike him being ugly, so this is a good chance for me to avoid marriage. My sisters can also cultivate while I'm not around and quickly throw away their beast bodies to transform into humans. Qin Mu shook his head. I can't bring Devil Ape and I also can't bring you. Hu Linger blinked her eyes innocently. Big fella is so dumb. How is he as intelligent as me? Furthermore, someone would need to take care of young master's food and accommodation, right? I don't want to marry Great Demon King. So does young Master Bear to send a fox to the tiger's den? Qin Mu was helpless and said, If you must follow, you'll have to listen to me and don't make any trouble. Okay. Beside surging river, Qin Mu offered a few incenses and started to sing, worshipping the river god. Not long later, river carriers swam over and after feeding the river carrier, a human and a fox stood on the back on the river carrier to go downstream, sailing past the fresh green hills and the bird songs in the secluded valleys. Qin Mu looked toward the side of the river as disabled elderly village flashed by his eyes. Granny C was still at the village entrance waving her hands at the youth. Mooer, don't be seduced by the vixens outside. Wretch! Beside Qin Mu, the little white fox sat earnestly and spat out her tongue at Granny C. At this moment, an old monk came to Doom Suppression Palace. On his head were mounds of flesh and he was wearing yellow kasaya as he strided over the valley. When he saw Devil Ape practicing Thunderclap 8 strikes, he involuntarily stopped in his footsteps and exclaimed in admiration. Devil Ape immediately stopped as the old monk smiled. You have cultivated pretty well, and you walked the path of our Buddhism. It's just that you didn't receive the true teachings. I shall impart this technique entirely to you. If you're fated to, you will be able to learn it. Devil Ape was bewildered and asked, Bald who? Are you referring to me? The old monk was amicable looking, yet he also looked solemn as he smiled. I'm the one in charge of Great Thunderclap Monastery whom they called Rulai. I'm not really bald. Have a touch. I had cultivated my hair into flesh. Devil Ape stretched out his huge hands and touched his head, crying out in astonishment, Bald hair! Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 97. Singing Voice in the Water. River Carrier swam all the way downstream and traveled 200 to 300 miles. On the riverside, Qin Mu saw a village built beside a temple and was slightly stunned when he saw a little girl combing her 3 braids as she sat on the horizontal inscribed board of the dilapidated temple. Qin Mu immediately made the river carrier stop and went ashore while leaving the white fox behind. Coming to this village, he could see the villagers were living in peace and prosperity. There were a few elderly women who went up to the temple to offer incense and half a pig as offerings. Qin Mu came to the temple, and when the little girl saw him, she immediately jumped down and hid in the temple. Woman Wu, I saw you. Why do you need to hide from me? Qin Mu smiled. The little girl came out from the temple smiling. I'm not hiding from you. I was waiting for you to enter the temple to offer incense and say words like you have a weak body and kidneys since young, so that I can make fun of you. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking around, he saw that the temple was cleanly kept and there wasn't a speck of dust. Only the incense was still burning in the incense burner. He walked to the god statue which the temple was worshipping and found that it was a little girl who looked exactly like Xian Qinger, which woman Wu transformed into. Qin Mu walked behind the god statue and laid down his worry when he discovered no white bones behind. Walking out of the temple, he asked curiously, Why are you staying here? Woman Wu was pleased with herself. I'm earning merit here. This village is under my protection and the villagers here make offerings for me. I help them chase away fierce beasts and sometimes carry river water to help water the lands. When the rain gets too heavy, I'll help them disperse the rain clouds. When there's no wind, I would help them create wind, and when the storm comes, I would drive the wind away. I wandered around long ago to catch beasts and humans to eat, which caused me to be caught and suppressed by the old Baldy. Now that I have become my own Buddha in my temple, not only I get offerings, there are still merits for me to earn. Qin Mu smiled. Didn't you went upstream? How did you end up here? After breaking the ice dam with you then, I began to wander around. In the end, I met the monks of Little Thunderclap Monastery and fought with them. I couldn't win them, therefore I escaped and ended up here. As I hid in this temple, bandits coincidentally invaded. Therefore, I ate them. The villagers here saw me and thought I was immortal from the temple which had answered their call. They offered cows, goats, and even incense to me. Receiving their goodwill, I was also embarrassed, therefore I did some work for them. Woman Wu jumped back onto the horizontal inscribed board and swung her legs. And so they treated me even better, and I became even more embarrassed and ended up staying here. Qin Mu laughed out loudly. Doing benevolent deed unintentionally. You are going to become Buddha. When he finished his words, he turned to leave. Woman Wu sent him off and muttered softly, I don't want to become a monk. What's the fun in being vegetarian every day? Qin Mu returned to the back of the river carrier, and this huge greenback beast gradually swam out of the shallow water region. Its speed gradually grew faster as he headed downstream. Looking back at the ancient temple, the little braids of the little girl in the temple swayed as she received the incense and offerings of the villagers. The waves churned on torrential surging river. When they reached the dock of Border Dragon City, Qin Mu and Hu Linger went ashore and came into the city. This city had already fallen into the hands of Heavenly Devil Cult, and even though Granny C didn't show her face as Fu Yundi for these few days, there weren't any problems. After all, Fu Yundi also frequently cultivated in seclusion. Qin Mu came to the inn and called the inn owner over. Incense Master, is there any method for me to avoid the inspection mirrors to enter Eternal Peace Empire? The inn master replied, There are 2 passes to enter Eternal Peace Empire. One is the Eternal Border and the other is the Secret Waters. The Eternal Border Pass and Secret Waters Pass are all heavily guarded and have inspection mirrors hanging on the city gate towers. Anyone who belongs to the abandoned people of Great Ruins would be shown out and be shot to death. Otherwise, they would be sent to the mines as slaves. If you want to go by the mountains, it would be even more dangerous. Eternal Peace and Great Ruins are connected by God-Broken Mountain Range. God-Broken Mountain Range was already so abnormally dangerous that even flying birds have trouble flying past. Eternal Peace Empire hid Mysterious Pearl. Crossbows in an ambush on the mountain range to guard against the mob of people from Great Ruins. If anyone thinks of crossing the mountains, they would be shot to death by the Mysterious Pearl crossbows. Qin Mu frowned and asked, "There is no other way to enter Eternal Peace Empire?" The inn owner smiled. "Others might not have, but our sacred cult has our own way. Before the trading route was open, our sacred cult had to smuggle goods. Therefore, we secretly destroyed 2 Mysterious Pearl crossbows on God-Broken Mountain Range to cross the dull and lonely mountain range, entering Great Ruins. Now that the trading route between Eternal Peace and Great Ruins is open, that route was abandoned since the trading route is much easier to enter Eternal Peace. If young master wants to enter Eternal Peace, you can go through Secret Waters Pass. Most of the guards at Secret Waters Pass are people from our sacred cult." Qin Mu's expression slightly changed. The power of Heavenly Devil Cult was simply too huge, as expected of the biggest sect following the path of the devil. He pondered over, "Prepare an Eternal Peace's geographic map. I shall have a look on the way to familiarize myself with the geography of Eternal Peace." Understood. The inn owner retreated. Qin Mu and Hu Linger ate dinner and showered before turning in. The next day, the inn owner brought over thick documents which had the entire geographic map of Eternal Peace Empire as well as the detailed maps of the counties. Qin Mu put the geographic maps into his bag and asked, "Who's going to bring me to Secret Waters Pass?" Inn owner smiled. "Don't worry, young master. Your meal has been prepared, and may I invite young master to dine first. When you reach the side of the river, there would be brothers from our sacred cult to lead young master." Qin Mu and Hu Linger ate breakfast and came to Surging River only to see a ship already berthed there. A young lady in green stood on the ship and greeted politely in a soft voice. "Greetings, young master. May I invite young master to come on board?" "Drop the formalities." Qin Mu brought Hu Linger up the ship and she asked the young lady in green, "Can sister bring me into the city and hide from the inspection mirrors?" The young lady in green smiled. "I definitely can't hide you from the inspection mirrors. However, I'm the high official of Secret Waters Pass, Feng Shuyun. I'm in charge of checking the people that enter and leave the city. Therefore, I can naturally bring young master in and out of the city." Qin Mu was astonished. This young lady didn't seem to be that old, and she was already the high official guarding the borders. He immediately replied, "Thanks for the trouble, Sister Feng." Under the ship, a huge beast floated up the water surface and started to swim downstream. After it swam an unknown distance, the river surface started to get wider and fog gradually rose. Just as the ship entered the fog, the speed of huge beast pulling the ship gradually slowed down and became irritated and uneasy. It was as if there was something under the water that frightened it. Feng Shuyun suddenly became bewildered. Why did this fellow suddenly throw a tantrum and isn't willing to pull the ship anymore? Hu Linger also suddenly got nervous and whispered, "Young master, I felt a presence coming closer to us, a very chilling presence." Suddenly at this moment, Qin Mu could faintly feel that something was looking at him. Fish Dragon leaped up behind him and spat out half of Junior Protector's sword from its mouth. Feng Shuyun had a grave expression and moved in front of Qin Mu to guard him. Suddenly air bubbles emerged from under the water and the fog grew as the numbers of air bubbles grew. However, other than that, there was no other unusual occurrence. Qin Mu composed himself. This river was too wide, and with the white fog getting heavier, they couldn't determine their directions. The little white fox used her spells, wanting to control her demon wind. However, her demon wind was entirely useless as it was unable to blow the fog away. Feng Shuyun took out a fan and jolted the surface of the fan. The fan suddenly grew to the height of a human and the young lady raised the fan to fan forward. A gale which was more powerful than the demon wind instantly rose, but she still couldn't drive the white fog away at all. The river water gently brought the ship down the river. The huge beast pulling the ship had already gone back down in the water and didn't dare to come back up. Therefore, the ship could only rely on the river water to bring it forward. Feng Xiuyun was extremely nervous, and at this moment, a singing voice came from the water. The voice was very gentle, and the tune was like a mother soothing her baby to sleep. However, there was no lyric but only a tune. Qin Mu was stunned. He somehow felt that this singing voice was very familiar. "I've heard this song before." The ship sailed forward, and the woman in the water followed like a shadow. The singing voice was coming from the mouth of the woman. "I really heard this song before, but this isn't the song that Granny C sang to coax me to sleep." Hearing the singing voice, Qin Mu felt close and dear, as well as a little agitated. As if a memory deep in his mind was trying to break out, he suddenly leaped off the ship and landed on the surface of the water. Feng Xiuyun stretched her hand out to grab him, but she didn't manage to. Hu Linger also jumped off, but she felt a chill down her spine uncontrollably when she saw the woman in the water. She immediately skipped and jumped to follow Qin Mu, creating ripples from her scurry. "Slow down, young master. I'm scared." The singing voice was still continuing, and no matter how fast he ran, he could never catch up to the woman in the water. Qin Mu became more and more flustered, and just as he was about to return to the ship, he suddenly noticed that the jade pendant in front of his chest had floated up lightly. Qin Mu stared blankly and halted as he looked at the face of the woman in the water. The woman in the water also stopped, and it seemed that Qin Mu wasn't the one chasing her, and she was the one chasing Qin Mu instead. That hump. The youth of disabled elderly village knelt down on the water surface and stretched out his trembling palms as he tried to touch the face of the woman in the water. Tears rolled out from his eyes and dripped onto the calm river surface. "Is it you? Are you the one who had sent me to disabled elderly village?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 98. Secret Waters. His hand stretched into the river water, but he couldn't touch the woman's face. "Why are you still here? Are you still thinking of protecting me?" Qin Mu cried. He couldn't grab the woman in the water no matter what. He stopped, and the woman under the water stopped too. However, it seemed like a world was between them and they could never touch each other. "Are you my kin? What happened? Why did you need to escape with me?" "To escape to disabled elderly village. Did you stay here to see me again?" The woman in the water could no longer answer his questions and could only look at him silently. Her eyes seemed to be filled with tender affection and gratification. Feng Xiuyun used her magic powers to drive the ship over, and she was about to attack the female corpse in the water. But when she saw Qin Mu kneeling on the water surface, she was stunned and didn't make a move. The female corpse in the water looked at the youth from disabled elderly village. 14 years ago she had floated here where the current had weakened, therefore she wasn't washed away by the river and had sunk to the river bed instead. A strong attachment made her remain in the water and wait quietly. Knowing the ship Qin Mu boarded was passing here, her strong attachment was woken up by the familiar jade pendant, impelling her to float up to the water to see the inverted image of the youth on the ship. "You see, I've grown up. I've survived." Qin Mu looked at the woman in the water and held back his tears. He gave a smile and spoke softly. "You can be at ease. I'll look for my ancestry and find my hometown. I'll seek out your past and remember your name forever." The woman in the water seemed to give a slight smile before slowly sinking back into the deep waters and vanished. Qin Mu knelt on the river surface in a daze and only got up after some time. He felt that he had really grown up and wasn't the ignorant boy he was before. He returned to the ship, and the fog gradually dispersed on the river. After the woman under the river had vanished, the fog also vanished. The river regained its clarity, and looking afar, one could see a grand pass towering and stretching over the entire surging river. This grand pass was actually pieced together by countless of ships which formed a huge barracks where a magnificent army of 1,000 men and horses was stationed. With chains locking the river, only a waterway was left in the middle. From this waterway, people could pass through Secret Waters Pass and entered the territory of Eternal Peace Empire. "Young master, here's Secret Water Pass." Feng Shiyun urged the huge beast which was pulling the ship to enter the waterway and said, "The inspection mirrors are in the middle of the city where the people are all mine. Therefore young master can be at ease." Qin Mu looked around and saw the majestic troops of secret waters pass. There were even steeds galloping from ship to ship rapidly. There were hardly any gaps between the ships. And with the ships joining together by tenons, they looked more like an extremely complicated construction instead of ships. Once the tenons were separated, the ships would still be ships and be able to sally at any times. The person who had constructed the place could be said to have heavenly skills. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. Feng Shiyun burst out in laughter. "Young master, Secret Water Pass was designed and constructed by Craftsman Hall Master from our cult." Qin Mu's heart slightly stirred and exclaimed even more in admiration. Now he finally knew why Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had to subdue Heavenly Devil Cult. Heavenly Devil Cult's power was definitely inferior to Eternal Peace Empire's great army, but Heavenly Devil Cult have people from all kinds of professions. 360 professions corresponded to 360 halls, where each and every one of them penetrated deeply into the haunts of the common people and had a deep foundation. The ship came into the city. There were some merchant ships in front waiting for inspections, forming a long queue on the waterway. On the other hand, Feng Shiyun steered the ship into a water lane and berthed to bring Qin Mu ashore. Hu Linger immediately followed up and skipped into Qin Mu's backpack with a few steps. Tunneling into the bag, she left a small head outside to look around curiously. "Young master, those are the inspection mirrors." Qin Mu looked in the direction where she was pointing and saw a floating bridge suspended over the waterway. In the middle of the bridge was a sparkling bright mirror which was aimed at the waterway. Any ships passing through this waterway would be reflected in this mirror. Merchant ships passing by must stop under the bridge, and every person must go through the illumination of the inspection mirrors. However, now that Qin Mu was ashore and avoided the inspection mirrors, he, of course, wouldn't worry being discovered by the inspection mirrors. Every 10 steps there were guards patrolling Secret Waters Pass, and the inspections were very strict. Luckily, he had Feng Shiyun bring him around. Therefore, he wasn't inspected along the way. Feng Shiyun brought him to the merchant's assembly area and told him, "Young master will have to stay in the city first, and there will be merchants leaving Secret Waters Pass tomorrow when the waterway is unlocked. Young master can leave with a caravan." She hesitated for a moment and continued, "Recently Eternal Peace Empire isn't in a state of peace. If young master was to move on your own, I'm afraid it wouldn't be too safe. It's best to move together with a caravan." Qin Mu was astonished. "Not in a state of peace?" The young lady looked around carefully and whispered in Qin Mu's ear. "Recently there are some strong practitioners who heard that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had suffered a loss when trying to invade Great Ruins. Therefore, they took the advantage to assassinate Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor on his way back. It was said that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was severely injured and nearly died. When this news was passed down, everyone was alarmed, and some sects which refused to comply with the imperial family's discipline took the chance to create havoc. Some of them seceded, some took the chance to seize territories, and many of them rebelled. Her fringe drooped into the youth collars and tickled him. Qin Mu's ear also itched from her breath. When Feng Shiyun saw his ears becoming red, she realized she was too close to him and immediately moved back. This youth was the future sacred cult master. How can she treat such an honorable person so carelessly? There's still one more thing. Feng Shiyun composed herself and measured Qin Mu. "Young master will have to change your attire. Eternal Peace is not Great Ruins. There's no need to wear clothes that are too sturdy." The clothes on Qin Mu's body were made out of beast skin. Granny C disliked him spoiling clothes when he trained every day, therefore she had made him wear beast skin since young. Although his clothes were made of beast skin, it was no ordinary beast skin but a delicate and thoughtful choice. Qin Mu's clothes were made out of the pelt of the strange beast, snow-cloud leopard. The skin with the fur removed made it cool to wear it in the summer and warm in the winter. The design might be good, but it wasn't nice looking. After Qin Mu learned to make his own clothes, he also used the pelt of snow-cloud leopard to make his clothes. The clothes he was wearing were all made by himself. If the material of his clothes was ordinary silk fabric, It would not take a day for his clothes to be spoiled from all his daily training with blind and butcher. Does sister know which place has good fabrics? Qin Mu asked. Feng Shiyun led him to a fabric store and went in to choose piece goods with Qin Mu. Walking around the store, Qin Mu still couldn't find any fabric he was satisfied with and called the boss over. Does your store have this kind of fabric? He took out the handkerchief that Ling Yuxiu gave him, and the fabric store boss got a shock when he saw it. He immediately shook his head and replied, "This is made from nature fragrance silk and belongs to tribute to the imperial family. How would my small fabric store have such high-quality goods?" Feng Shiyun smiled. "Incense Master Chu, this is the young master." The fabric store boss got a shock and immediately wanted to bow down to greet, but Qin Mu held him up by the arm. "This is Secret Waters Pass, and there are many eyes watching. Drop the formalities." The fabric store boss Incense Master Chu smiled. "Subordinate didn't recognize young master and had neglected you. Please wait a moment, young master." He quickly went into the storeroom of the fabric store and took out a fabric not long after. "Young master, even though nature fragrance silk is the tribute to the imperial family, but there are also some fabrics that are not inferior to nature fragrance silk. This roll of fabric is the treasure of my small store, and it's called golden natural silk. The venom insect hall of our sacred cult is good at creating venomous insect. They changed the venomous insect, 100 venom golden silkworm, into 6 wings golden silkworm, which is incomparably venomous. When this 100 venom 6 wings golden silkworm grows, it would spit out natural silk, which is extremely tenacious. This silk is impenetrable by swords and spears, immune to fire and water, and repels hundreds of poisons. This roll of fabric was handed to me by Venom Insect Hall Master for sale. Young master, please have a look." Qin Mu gently caressed the fabric, and the silk was smooth with a hint of chill to it. The fabric had a light gold color with strange markings on it. Pulling the fabric with his hand, he realized he couldn't tear it at all, which was why he couldn't help exclaiming in admiration and was very pleased. "How much is it?" Incense Master Chu immediately shook his head and replied, "How would I dare to accept young master's money? This is a present to young master from me and Venom Insect Hall Master." Qin Mu smiled. "You can't accept, but I have to give. Linger, take out the coin pouch." Linger, who was always in the bag on his back, only showed her small head and immediately tunneled into the bag when she heard Qin Mu. Shortly after, she took out a coin pouch, and Qin Mu said, "These are dragon coins and shouldn't be usable in Eternal Peace Empire. I'm giving them all to you." Incense Master Chu could only keep the coin pouch and replied, "Eternal Peace Empire uses the Great Abundance coins, which are definitely different from the currency of Great Ruins. Young master, there are a few thousand coins in this pouch, so let subordinate exchange them for some Great Abundance coins for you. It might be useful on your way." Qin Mu pondered and nodded. "Thanks for the trouble. How do I cut this golden natural silk?" Incense Master Chu smiled. "Normal spirit weapons aren't able to cut this fabric. In my small shop, there's a dragon's teeth scissors which can still barely cut it. Please wait a moment, young master." He came to the front of the hall and took out 3 incense to light. At the front of the hall, there was a tiny shrine, and a pair of scissors was worshipped in the shrine. Incense Master Chu paid his respect to the scissors and carefully took it down, passing it to Qin Mu. "Subordinate shall offer this scissors to young master as a little tribute." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Incense Master, I'm not going to keep your scissors?" Splendid scissors." He gave a startled expression. Touching the scissors, he felt that it seemed to be made out of warm jade and was very mild and humid. When his vital qi dipped into the scissors, it was like an extension of his body and had totally no obstruction. Furthermore, he could feel a terrifying power hidden in the scissors which were beginning to stir. This power was extremely terrifying and very ferocious. Qin Mu tried to cut the corners of the fabric, and the abnormally tenacious golden natural silk fabric was cut apart. Even though it was slightly strenuous, the sharpness of the scissors could be clearly seen. "Truly a splendid scissors," Qin Mu exclaimed again. Incense Master Chu brought over needle and thread, which was also made from the silk of 100 venom golden silkworm. Swoosh! Qin Mu stretched his hand and waved, instantly sweeping up the entire roll of fabric into the air as his vital qi burst forth. With the fabric hanging down, Qin Mu used his qi to manipulate the scissors and cut the fabric. At the same time, the needle which Incense Master Chu had brought over also flew up by his vital qi and automatically threaded the needle to sew the fabric which had been cut in the air. This skill was extremely eye-catching and made everyone who had come into the store to buy fabric to stop and look. Not long after, Qin Mu put the scissors, needle, and thread back as a set of clothing gently dropped down. The first piece was an overlapping brocaded gown with narrow sleeves and ridges near the button area. The second piece was a belt and the third piece was a brocaded shirt while the fourth was pants. Incense Master raised his hand. "May young master enter the inner room to change your clothing." Qin Mu went into the inner room while Incense Master Chu and Feng Shuyun waited outside. Feng Shuyun frowned and muttered, "Why did young master learn how to tailor from cult mistress? How could this be something the young cult master should be learning to do?" Incense Master Chu replied, "The clothes that young master made had already reached a professional level." Feng Shuyun sneered, "You sure are good at bootlicking. I'm simply holding you in contempt. You just gave young cult master a valuable fabric made from the silk of the 100 venom golden silkworms, which required thousands of golden silkworms to weave out such a roll of fabric. A single silk spit out by 100 venom golden silkworm is roughly equal to the worth of this bag of dragon coins here, and this set of clothing for the young master is priceless." When the door of the inner room opened and Qin Mu walked out, the eyes of both of them lit up. The people in the fabric store also looked over as well and exclaimed silently, "What a charming youth!" Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 99, Path of the Saint. Qin Mu walked over, looking dashingly handsome. As what people said, clothes make the man. These clothes were extremely fitting on his body and much fabulous than the beast's skin clothes. Incense Master Chu smiled. "Young master has a superb handicraft. Even I want the young master to stay and be a tailor." Qin Mu smiled. "This is Granny's handicraft. I'm just showing what I have learned." Incense Master Chu smiled. "Young master, even though this fabric is impenetrable to blades and spears, it can't block needle-like spirit weapons, so young master needs to take note." Qin Mu nodded his head and thanked him for his good intentions. Incense Master Chu clapped his hands and called a young guy over. He softly instructed him, and the young guy took a coin pouch over to pass it to Qin Mu. Incense Master Chu smiled. "Young master, even though there's not much money in this coin pouch, this is subordinate's goodwill." Qin Mu grabbed a bunch of coins, which was about 100, from the coin pouch and smiled. "I've taken the treasure of your store and I'm already satisfied. You should take the rest back." Incense Master Chu understood and said, "Gifting the rouge and powder to the beautiful woman and presenting the treasure sword to the hero. This dragon teeth scissor has always been worshipped at my place and rarely used. Since young master has a superb handicraft, why don't you keep it?" Qin Mu immediately declined, and Incense Master Chu could only drop the matter. Feng Shuyun sent Qin Mu to the inn and said as she took her leave, "Young master, when the waterway is unlocked tomorrow, the caravans would leave Secret Waters Pass. Young master must remember to leave with the caravans, as these days are really not in a state of peace." Qin Mu expressed his thanks. When night came, Hu Linger lighted the oil lamp and Qin Mu took the chance to raise his glove when there was light. On the glove, a thread stretched its head out like a spirit snake and gradually became thicker. Shortly after, he could see the writings of great educational heavenly devil scriptures and analyze them in great detail. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures was a scripture which could turn one into God and into devil. When Qin Mu had left, Granny C passed the scripture to him, but she didn't teach him how to cultivate it and let him comprehend it himself. Granny C said great educational heavenly devil scriptures was originally from a saint who had come down to the mortal realm and planned to use this technique to enlighten all living beings. But this technique was too easy to be cultivated wrongly. Therefore, it was known as Heavenly Devil Scriptures. Qin Mu carefully analyzed the summary of great educational Heavenly Devil Scriptures, and the opening of this devil scripture was a sentence which could rouse even the apathetic. "The path of the saint is none other than the everyday use for common people. Anyone who does otherwise is considered heresy. To act straightforwardly, to follow the course of nature, that's the meaning of path." Qin Mu jumped in shock. The meaning of this sentence was that every principle, no matter it was the path of God, devil, or Buddha, was heresy if it couldn't be used for the common people. As long as it could be used every day by common people, it was the righteous path. What is called the righteous path? To act straightforwardly and follow the course of nature. With the opening being so ferocious, no wonder people would call it a devil Bible. However, this sentence had also fixed the foundation of Heavenly Devil cult. The 360 halls and hall masters of Heavenly Devil cult were all originated from the 360 professions belonging to the haunts of common people. They were all for the everyday use for common people and could be seen commonly. The divine arts used by the 360 halls were also for daily use, for example, Rain Hall master casting spells to create rain and solving the drought problems for the commoners. These were common works of art, while the paths of God and Buddha were like elegant works of art. As a matter of fact, Qin Mu felt that the summary of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures wasn't illogical. However, it was easy to misunderstand it. There were many different kinds of techniques in great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. There were all kinds of unusual techniques, all kinds of divine arts that people had never thought of. The thousands of strange and weird techniques dazzled Qin Mu's eyes, dumbfounding him. However, Qin Mu pulled the glove into a thread and read from the beginning to the end. His eyebrows frowned deeper and deeper when he realized that there was actually no technique which could link the beginning to the end. Techniques are split into technique and skill. For example, Qin Mu's Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique was a technique, an internal power. Whereas skills were Pig Slaughtering Knife skill, Heavenly Pilfering Leg skill, Thunderclap 8 Strikes, and etc. Skills were the gateway to unleash the power of techniques. If a skill wanted to unleash its full power, it must have a corresponding technique. For example, Thunderclap 8 Strikes required Rulai's Mahayana Sutra to be able to unleash its full power. There may be plenty of skills and techniques in great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, but there was no technique which was able to command all techniques and skills. With just this alone, it didn't deserve to be called the Devil Bible, which could turn one into devil and into God. The great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures isn't complete. Qin Mu immediately thought of the crucial point. Great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures may be all-inclusive, but it lacked a technique to unify all. There were too many techniques and divine arts, therefore it made cultivating technique of each strenuous, even though every technique and skill was not bad, actually pretty powerful. Thus, it was impossible to complete cultivating great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. In great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, there were over 1,000 kinds of techniques and skills, and each skill had a corresponding technique. There was no technique which could control all the skills. What could have resulted this was that great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures wasn't complete. However, it's impossible for great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures to be incomplete, for this technique to be regarded as a precious treasure by Heavenly Devil cult. There must be a technique which could unify all these techniques and divine arts in this cult legacy technique. Otherwise, Heavenly Devil cult wouldn't relentlessly search for Granny for 40 years. Qin Mu's heart slightly stirred and read great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures from the beginning to the end again, but he still couldn't see the outline of it. He then checked it from the end to the beginning, yet he still didn't discover anything. Where exactly is the secret of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures? Granny also might not have discovered the summarized technique of great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures. Qin Mu sunk into deep thoughts. Among the 9 elders in disabled elderly village, Granny C was at the lowest realm. This should be why she wasn't able to combine all the various kinds of techniques from the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures as a whole. She should have only cultivated some of the techniques in it to prevent herself from wasting her time and energy from cultivating too many techniques. It was nearly an impossible feat for a person to learn all the thousands of techniques and skills as well as to master all of them in their living years. Could it be in that jade box which the patriarchs of the past generations had sealed? Qin Mu rummaged in his bag and found the jade box. This jade box had also been stuffed inside it by Granny C. Qin Mu tried opening the jade box, but there were many talismans sealing it. When Granny C created a havoc at Border Dragon City then, she had said that the talismans were the seals of the Heavenly Devil cult masters of past generations. Qin Mu pinched onto one talisman and gently peeled it. To his surprise, the talisman came off easily. Qin Mu stared blankly and looked at the back of the talisman. There were a few words written on it. "It's fake, hee. Granny sure knows how to have fun." Qin Mu shook his head and peeled off the other talismans to open the box. There was also nothing inside the box. Without the technique to unite everything, who's able to cultivate great educational heavenly devil scriptures? He couldn't help having a headache. Pondering upon this a while, he said silently to himself, "My technique is Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique, and since I already have a technique, why do I need to search for the method to unify great educational heavenly devil scriptures? Can't I just use my Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique?" He executed what he had thought of and opened great educational heavenly devil scriptures and found a spell called Secrets of Moving Rain. In just a short while, he had learned the spell. He pushed open the window and looked at the darkness outside. He hesitated for a moment and immediately came to a realization. This isn't the lands of great ruins anymore. The darkness outside is just normal darkness. There are still pedestrians outside, and there's no need to be afraid. Qin Mu relaxed and leaped out from the window. Stretching his hand out to grab the eaves, he gently pulled himself upwards and somersaulted onto the roof of the inn. A gust of wind blew out from the window as the white fox flew out on a pillow. With the demon wind blowing, the pillow floated up to the roof and landed beside Qin Mu. "What's that in the sky?" The fox suddenly cried out while pointing to the moon in the sky, startled and scared. "That's the moon." Qin Mu raised his head to take a look with a blurry gaze and said, "That should be the moon, I guess? I have seen the moon in the day, and it looks similar to this moon." He also couldn't be sure. When he was still a child, Granny C would point to a faint silver sphere in the sky during the day and tell him that was the moon, which was very bright at night. However, ever since he remembered, he had never seen the moon at night before. The night in Great Ruins was complete darkness and nothing could be seen in the sky. Similarly, there were no stars in the night of Great Ruins. The full moon shone brightly as it was the 16th day of the 5th month of the year. Under the moonlight, Qin Mu executed the secrets of moving rain, and the mist in the sky above the inn instantly condensed, and pattering rain fell. Qin Mu waved his hand and all the rain instantly froze and strings of water hanged in the air as if time had stopped. Hu Linger clicked her tongue in wonder and jumped up to touch these strings of water. She ended up drenching her fur. Therefore, she immediately returned to the inn to dry her fur. On the rooftop, Qin Mu changed his technique and used vital qi to execute secrets of moving water, to strum the strings of water. Instantly, the strings of water gave off beautiful music that could only be made with traditional music instruments. As the music sounded out, the rain turned into razor-sharp water blades which flew into the sky. These water blades flew over 30 yards before they started to lose power and turn back into flowing water. This was the gathering area for trading, and most of the people here were merchants. Therefore, no one would get involved with him cultivating here. It's still not good. It doesn't flow smoothly. Qin Mu's footsteps moved as he continuously strummed the strings of water. Hundreds of weapons crisscrossed and collided with each other in the rain, filling the sky with murderous aura. Hu Linger floated out from the window of the inn and applauded repeatedly with her furry paws. Secrets of Moving Rain had its own technique, and Qin Mu always felt it was hard to unleash the full power of Secret of Moving Rain while using Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. The power of his spell was already spectacular, however this was because of his extremely strong cultivation. If it was another suitable skill, the power of that skill would definitely be much stronger. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 100. 7 Writings of Creation. Qin Mu returned to the inn and continued to study great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Unknowingly, it was late at night and Qin Mu had already learned over a dozen spells. However, with no corresponding techniques, only half the power of the spells could be unleashed. I have to find a unification technique, otherwise it would be hard to unleash the full power of great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Just as he was entranced by the book, he suddenly felt a warmth at his waist as if there was something warming him up. Lowering his head to have a look, it was the little white fox who had fallen asleep while leaning on his body and nudged her head on him. Qin Mu revealed a smile and carefully sent the little demon fox back to her bed to let her rest her head on the pillow. He then returned to the table and continued to study great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Sometime later, he felt drowsy too and decided to extinguish his lamp. He then fell asleep unknowingly after lying on his bed. The next morning Feng Shiyun came to take Qin Mu to the ship, then said, "Young master, I can only see you off here. You will be able to reach eternal peace by following the river down from here. Young master, be careful on your journey and get to eternal peace capital city as early as possible. Patriarch is already there waiting for you." Qin Mu nodded and waved his hand to bid goodbye. In front of the fleet of ships, there was a soldier cranking the capstan on top of the towering wharf to open up the huge iron lock. The ships gradually moved out of Secret Waters Pass and followed the currents to sail down Surging River. Qin Mu and Hu Linger stood at the bow of the ship and looked around. The scenery at both sides of Surging River gradually became different from great ruins. There were flourishing villages hidden among the forests and mountains which were unlike great ruins where there were all straw huts. The ships on the river also gradually increased in numbers. Most of them were ships carrying ores and goods. Therefore, they were submerged deep in the water. There were also mines at the sides of the river and numerous slaves were mining. How many of the people here are abandoned people from great ruins? Qin Mu thought as he retracted his gaze. Moving forward another 30 miles, there were refineries at the sides of the river. Huge great furnaces were refining the ores which had been dropped off by the numerous ships berthed here. The violent flames rose dozens of yards upwards from the great furnace, and as their ships sailed past, Qin Mu could see several divine arts practitioners air blasting and executing spells to raise the heat and intensity of the fire. There were some divine arts practitioners who were using spells to control the river water to cool down the black iron and red copper. There were also some divine arts practitioners executing divine arts with white tiger vital chi to cut up the black irons and red coppers into neat cubes which made it easier to stack and store in the ship. This sight was very rare in great ruins. No matter whether in manpower, resources, or wealth, eternal peace far surpassed great ruins. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. One can know a lot by seeing a little. They could see the prosperity and strength of a country from just the slightest things. The refineries beside Surging River were close to a water source. Therefore, it made freight transport more convenient, which helped to provide materials endlessly to the empire. These materials were used to forge spirit weapons and upgrade the military armaments. Therefore, one could imagine how great the military power of Eternal Peace Empire was. Feng Shiyun said there were sects which took the chance to rebel and assassinate Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor on his way back after suffering a loss in great ruins, causing Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor to suffer grave injuries. Qin Mu thought to himself, even though Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had suffered a loss, the power of the army wasn't reduced and still had its full strength. With numerous strong practitioners by his side and being the number one man below gods, how was he severely injured from being assassinated? There is something fishy, and if they misjudge the situation, I'm afraid these sects that had revolted will die miserably. The merchant ship had a huge beast in the water pulling it along, therefore it traveled at an extremely fast speed and reached Dike River County in the evening. Dike River County was constructed along the river and somewhat bigger than Border Dragon City. Looking around with his heaven's eyes, Qin Mu didn't find any divine statue with majestic grandeur and felt slightly uneasy. Suddenly he came to the realization and mocked himself. I thought I was still in great ruins. Living in great ruins since young, it was already his instinct to look for places to stay that were under the protection of the divine statue before nightfall. It would be hard for him to change this habit within a short period of time. In front of Dike River County, the caravan suddenly stopped. Fishing boats appeared in front of them, and there were fishermen that were using hooks to fish up the dead bodies in the water. What bad luck! A merchant shook his head. Qin Mu brought Hu Linger with him and entered the city with the caravan. Just as he stepped into the city, he saw numerous coffins placed on both sides of the street. There were about 400 to 500 of them. Qin Mu jumped in shock. Some coffins were empty and there were soldiers who were carrying corpses to place them inside the coffins. Some coffins were covered up and the residents of the city had all avoided far away, not daring to come near. What happened here? Why did so many people die all at once? Qin Mu was bewildered. A merchant went forward to ask, and a soldier replied, "They're floating corpses swept over here by the river. We also don't know where they came from. We reckon that there was a flood upstream and drowned them, washing them down to our dike river county. Then they got intercepted by the dam. The county magistrate said that if these corpses piled up, a plague would occur. Therefore they ordered us to make some thin coffins to put the corpses in. We then will bury them tomorrow morning." So that's what happened. One after another, the merchants drove their carts around to avoid the coffins and look for inns to rest their feet. Qin Mu also found an inn to stay. After dinner, he took out the geographic map of Eternal Peace to study. Dike River County was in the central of Eternal Peace. Heading up north, he would be able to reach the capital city in about 10 days. If he continued east, he would be able to see the sea in about 1,000 miles. The sky gradually dimmed and darkness of the night got denser and denser. Qin Mu put down the map and looked out the window. The darkness here was different from the darkness in Great Ruins. The night sky in Eternal Peace Empire turned dark slowly, and there were the moon and the stars shining in the sky. However, when night fell in Great Ruins, darkness swarmed over from the west and shrouded everything instantly. There was no light in the darkness. He carefully stretched his hand outside the window, and there was no danger in the darkness outside. What exactly had Great Ruins gone through to have such a weird occurrence like the darkness invasion? The youth dispelled the doubts in his heart and took out great educational heavenly devil scriptures to continue to study. Pulling out a thread from his white glove, he soaked his vital qi into it, and the thread instantly expanded. Becoming thicker and thicker, it revealed innumerable writings. Qin Mu studied it attentively. This time he was comprehending the creation writings of great educational heavenly devil scriptures. There were quite different varieties of creation writings in great educational heavenly devil scriptures. There were heavenly devil creation technique, heavenly god creation technique, pre-celestial creation technique, human king creation technique, ghost creation technique, spirit creation technique, and earth aeon creation technique. Among them, Qin Mu had learned heavenly devil creation technique, but Granny C didn't teach him the complete technique and only taught him the method to seal souls and spirits. There are 7 writings in creation technique, which are pre-celestial technique, earth aeon technique, heavenly god technique, heavenly devil technique, human king technique, ghost technique, and spirit technique. They were all interrelated to creation, so could there be some relation between them? Qin Mu studied writing after writing. Stripping skin to make clothes was only an additional path of heavenly devil creation technique. The most powerful point of this technique was to strengthen one's souls and spirits. Heavenly God creation technique was good in imitating the technique of others. However, after studying it carefully, Qin Mu felt what the heavenly God creation technique was trying to express was to have an impermanence power and form. Imitating other techniques and divine arts was just the superficial of heavenly God technique. Pre-celestial technique reverses the aging process, therefore this technique could make one stay young forever. The young patriarch of heavenly devil cult should have cultivated pre-celestial creation technique. The pre-celestial freedom technique of heavenly devil cult should be a branch of pre-celestial creation technique. Earth aeon technique cultivates the living soul. Human king technique cultivates the way of the king. Ghost technique cultivates the communication with the underworld. Spirit technique cultivates transformation. The 7 writings of creation technique all had their exquisite points but were difficult to understand. Qin Mu was engrossed in the book. He pondered the wonders of the writings until the late night before he realized it. The perfect stillness outside was interrupted only by occasional gong-hit sounds from the night street patrol. At this moment, a cold wind blew in from outside the window. The candlelight flickered and Qin Mu immediately raised his hands to protect the candle flame. Suddenly a soft creak came from the street which sounded clearly in the silent night. Qin Mu was startled and extinguished the flame with his hand. Rushing to the side of the window, he closed the window and left only a slit open. Spreading his fingers open, the thread transformed by great educational heavenly devil scriptures immediately flew over and weaved itself into a glove which was as thin as cicada's wing. Looking out from the window, Qin Mu could see moonlight shining onto the streets of Dike River County. With coffins placed on both sides of the street, the night watchman struck his gong as he walked over from the other end of the street. Suddenly, the night watchman seemed to see something as he stopped. Creak, creak. The weird sound traveled out. The lid of a coffin was pushed half opened and a figure sat up in the coffin. Clang. The gong in the startled night watchman's hand dropped onto the ground and the figure in the coffin suddenly flashed past. Landing in front of the night watchman, who was currently frightened stiff, the corpse stabbed forward with both of his hands and severed the night watchman's head from his neck. Qin Mu's heart trembled slightly. He could hear more creaks sounding out continuously as the coffin started to open up as the floating corpse sat up. At this moment, a door opened up on the street as dozens of Taoists came out one after another. The Taoist in the lead wore an 8 divinatory trigrams yellow robe and a Taoist cap on his head. A horsetail whisk rested on his elbow as he trod on the clouds. The Taoists behind him were wearing black Taoist robes, and they all had sword cases on their backs as they followed silently. Yellow joss paper flew out from the sleeves of the yellow-robed Taoist and floated in the air, forming a long bridge. The long bridge formed by the yellow joss paper connected from this end of the street all the way to the yamen of Dike River County's magistrate. Afterwards, the floating corpses leaped up and flew out from the coffins. Sprinting stiffly in the air, they stepped on the yellow joss paper and ran towards the yamen. Concentrating his gaze, Qin Mu saw the corpses rushing into the yamen. After that, more yellow joss paper flew out from the yellow-robed Taoist's sleeve and formed bridges in the sky. However, this time it was to the north, south, east, and west gates. Behind him, the black-robed Taoists immediately rose into the sky and headed towards all 4 gates while stepping on the yellow joss paper. Crap! Qin Mu's heart jolted and spun around like a whirlwind. Packing up his clothes into a bundle, he woke up the white fox and quickly said, "Don't say a word, we need to leave quietly. Linger, wield your wind." Hu Linger didn't understand what he was saying and blinked her sleepy eyes in a daze. Suddenly a world-shaking bang came from the yamen and a voice cried out in astonishment and anger, "Flying zombies! There are flying zombies. The corpse immortal cult had invaded. Quickly protect the Lord. Your Lord is dead and here is his head."